and costs and overheads, although we can cover those things if they're related to delivering the specific project. But this is not core funding, this is project funding. We can't fund statutory further or higher education institutions, or we can't fund that activity, and it can't be retrospective activity, so you can't claim for costs that you've undertaken already. Or we can't support profit-making activities. It has to be a balanced budget. The application form, as mentioned, they're the 4 areas that you're effectively answering questions on. As it says, so the more money you ask for, the more questions we ask. So if you are applying for over 15,000, you have to go into quite a bit more detail, particularly on the finance and management side of things. And along that scale, from 15,000 upwards, there's certain points where other criteria will come in, and you'll be asked to, provide things like risk registers, audited accounts, and that sort of thing. So I mean, if you've started an application and you need some more help with it, customer services are brilliant at responding to all sorts of inquiries. Now, at the moment, they're all working from home, so that phone line you can't actually speak to anybody in person, but they're very quick to answer on email. Relationship managers like myself and Liam, certainly at the moment, we're relatively available for inquiries, but we're about to have an extremely busy period dealing with the cultural recovery funds that you may have heard about in the news. And so I think when we get to the sort of end of August, it might be hard to get hold of us, but customer services are always there, and I'd very much recommend them for help. You can get guidance and other supporting documents in alternative formats if you need them, and there is financial support actually for access as well if you need. They're in the process of applying. This is the flowchart of how the process works once you've made an application to us. First of all, it's looked at the investment centre in Manchester for eligibility. There's a risk check as part of that process as well. And then if all's fine, there's a written appraisal that probably a relationship manager in your area does, only if this is only for a grant or an ask that's over £15,000. If not, it just goes straight through to a decision meeting, which is where a panel will look at the applications and decide which ones they can fund. In terms of how the money gets to you, if you're successful with an application for £15,000 and under, you will get 90% of the funding right away. The final 10% you will get on completion of a final activity report. If it's over 15,000, you get 50% straight away, and you have I can't remember what they call it, but it's basically sort of a mid-term activity report you have to submit to get the 40%, and then again you get the final 10% once you've completed the project and hand in your final report. Right, so I think I know it's a little bit breakneck. I'm just trying to leave as much time as possible for questions, but that's the overview. All of this stuff is available on the Arts Council website, artscouncil.org.uk, but anything specific we can answer questions for now.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Adrian. Would anybody like to kick things off with a question? Let's see.
Hello, I'd like to ask a question if I've unmuted myself successfully.
Yes, go ahead.
So it's Mary Archer, Chair of Cambridge Early Music. Hello, Adrian. Nice to see you.
Hello.
And
Hello.
Really, really exciting. May I say how nice it is to see this new thinking going in to projects at this time. So my question is, as it were, how far in advance or little in advance does your project need to be? I think there would be a slight difference between under 15k and over 15k applications, but I'm sort of thinking of something that I'd love to do, in fact, for Roots Year 3 of our project. with Brook Street Band, Voces 8 and schools in the Cambridgeshire area. But that wouldn't be till next summer. So what's the timescale? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, so so the basic timescale is that once you've submitted your application, if you're asking for £15,000 or under, that will be turned around in 6 weeks. So you'll have an answer in 6 weeks. Anything over 15,000 takes 12 weeks because it's a longer process of assessment. So they're the two dates you're working on.
Absolute minimum 3 months in advance of the start time.
Exactly. Yeah. So obviously you can't apply for something that's due to start, you know, halfway through that period, whether it's 6 or 12 weeks. So next summer, obviously, you've got loads of time. If that's what we talk, you know, we're talking summer 21, then you've got lots of time.
Okay, that's great. And when you open for applications?
It opened last week. It's open now.
Okay, it is open.
And it's not going to shut, you know. I mean, this particular period, you know, runs to the rest of the financial year. So it will renew at the end of March 21.
Thank you. Really interested, because my other hat is I chair the Science Museum, in your wanting to partner with museums. And I wonder, don't want to hog the limelight in terms of questions, but could you say a word about why? That's a very arresting thing to do, liaising with museums.
That's a question for Liam, I think.
In what way do you mean liaising with museums? Because we've been funding them for quite some time now.
Yes, but these projects, I suppose I'm thinking of Adrian and myself in the musical context, but of course the Arts Council, as I well know, does support museums. So a project that hit both buttons, music and museums, would be square in your ball court.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the project ideas that you come up with are completely up to you, and you have autonomy of the project as long as we agree to fund it. But yeah, if your project happens to meet more than one of our art forms, that's even better as far as we're concerned. And there's no reason why we shouldn't do a music project in a museum or vice versa. Honestly, we love to see our art forms come together. So anyone that has any more ideas to combine the two or more, that's brilliant.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Mary. Is there anybody else who'd like to ask a question? Please raise your hand or just unmute yourself.
There's a question here from Sarah in the chat. Sarah, do you want to come in and say it? Okay, maybe not.
Okay.
Sarah's asked, is there anything specifically different about the new National Lottery project grants criteria and application process this year? Adrian, there are a couple of changes, aren't there? I think the biggest one being that we've removed the match funding requirement. There used to be a match funding requirement of 10% match funding for any of our grant projects, which we've removed, obviously, as a result of the current situation with everyone's finances being restricted and things being in a much tighter situation than they were before. And the other one is again, for museum activity. If you're a museum freelancer, so someone that freelances and works with museums and delivers activity in museums, but isn't employed by the museum, you can also now apply for project grants through us as well. I think those two are the main changes.
Yeah.
Great. We also have Jemima Wilcox, who raised her hand.
Hi, everybody. Be great to learn. So my name is Jemima Wilcox. I'm a portrait photographer in Cambridge. I am the co-founder of Elevate Her, Cambridge's female tech icons. Our project is to elevate, educate and raise the awareness of the female tech icons in Cambridge. We were meant to launch this year, but unfortunately due to COVID, it's not happened. It has given the opportunity to look at options like the funding sources you guys talking about. I was just wondering if you could go into more detail on the specifics of running costs. You said that can't be covered. So could you give me some examples of what running costs you're saying that wouldn't be included in funding?
Well, it's anything that's outside the delivery of the project that you're applying for. So, I mean, obviously you need to apportion some resource to managing the project, but you can't come in and say, oh, we'd like 50% of, you know, our program manager's salary covered. You know, that's not a project, that's just covering, do you see what I mean? So
yeah,
it's got to be appropriate to what, you know, this specific project that you're delivering rather than your general running costs. So you can actually, you can include proportions of what generally is your running cost, but it's got to be about apportioning it specifically to delivering this project, whatever that is.
okay, that's fine. No, it's more about the certain members of my team that I want to make sure that are remunerated in some way, and I wasn't sure what the percentage of how I could make sure they were supported.
Yeah, I mean, I know other funders do sometimes put a limit on the percentage of salaries in a project. I mean, really, we'd look at it as what's appropriate to the delivery of this project. I mean, you'd want to put in the application your workings out in terms of why it's that amount, why you're paying a program manager or whatever, you know, that amount of money, and you might say, well, this is the hourly rate and this is the amount of time that it needs. But there's not a percentage, you know, there's not a prescribed percentage or anything like that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jemima. Now Leslie Ford.
Hi everyone. My question is about geography, really. Your starter for 10 is if we apply to, do we apply to a Cambridge office and then must the project take place in Cambridge? I'm talking in the theatre world. How does that work? Or can we apply for funding and then we can take our play to Cornwall, for example?
Yeah, well, you can, I mean, basically, this is about activity that takes place in or benefits audiences in England. So it doesn't really matter where in England you are or where you want to work. So in your case, I mean, it's wider than Cambridge. We're actually part of the southeast, believe it or not, in Cambridge. So we've got 5 Arts Council areas since they were sort of reorganised a few years ago. So Cambridge and the Brighton office actually are one area. So the whole of the southeast and the east is one area. So that's who the pool of people that you're in with, you know, that's who it is. So so, you know, and beyond that, it doesn't matter. I mean, if it's, as I say, it doesn't, even if the activity you wanted to deliver was happening in London, because if you're based in Cambridge, your application would come to us and we'd assess it in the southeast in the Cambridge office. So that's how that was. That answered your question?
Kind of, but then presumably if it's something like a tour, theatre tour, we could take to other regions. We could go to Cornwall or Liverpool.
Exactly. Yeah, but your application would still come to us.
Yeah.
I think if it's over £15,000, you're doing, I think this is right, if you're doing a tour in more than one other area, then I think that counts as national activity, so it would be looked at, you know, nationally as well. I think that's all right. It's not right, Liam, have I made that up?
Yeah. So when it comes to national activity, it's activity that takes place in 2 or more of our Arts Council areas in England. With national activity, it will be assessed on the need of the area you apply for, but also potential that it can bring to the other area that you're going to be working in as well. So, for example, if it was Cornwall, they would look at, is that, you know, what's the kind of scope for touring theatre in Cornwall? What are the benefits it could bring? Obviously, there's plenty of benefits there. So it will be assessed across both areas, but come to one conclusion. The other thing about national activity is, depending on the scale of money you're interested in going for, you can apply for over £100,000 and extend the scope of the project, because obviously we want to see more touring activity happening across the whole of England.
Great, thank you. That's answered me.
We also have a question from Jasmine following on about the match funding. Is the removal of match funding likely to be a temporary change? It is a temporary change at the moment. The changes that we made to project grants will last until April in 2021. We're using this as kind of an opportunity to see how this works and whether it's positive, or, you know, what the potential is for further changes and figuring out what project grants can be going forwards. So it's temporary at the moment. Might continue depending on how well it's received, but at the moment it's just because of the COVID situation. Yeah. Then questions about galleries versus museums. If you're talking about freelancers working in galleries, we've always funded freelancers that work within our galleries, so that's nothing new. But we also do fund galleries through project grants as well. So there's nothing stopping galleries from or gallery workers from applying this fund.
We've got a couple more hands raised. First of all, Maya Leek.
Yeah, hello. I'm just wondering, for the access money, is that included in, say, under the 15k, or is access separate to this? Are you able to apply for that additionally?
Yeah, so yeah, the access is on top of that. Yeah, that's a separate ask. So if you were applying for a 15, but you also needed access costs, you wouldn't suddenly be pushed into the over 15
right. Okay.
category. It's a separate budget. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And now we've got a question from Z.
Hi, I'm Z. Yeah, I'm just interested. So I'm just like a solo artist, but I'm interested in kind of, yeah, creating community and things, like something that would be ongoing. In terms of funding, like how would that still work? Whether it be like projects that I do within that kind of community space? Yeah.
Do you mean in terms of something that's likely to be ongoing and ongoing and ongoing? Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's up to you how you phrase it. I mean, probably my advice would be, or if it was me doing it, I would start with one relatively smallish project to sort of get it going, and then, if that all went well, then I'd come back in and say, right, now I want to do part 2 of this initiative, but this is why it's changing, and this is how it differs from the last project, because the scale might be bigger, or there might be more artists involved, or whatever it is. I do it in a sort of almost bite-sized chunks that are sort of easy to manage. And also, if you are new to Arts Council, I think generally speaking, it's best to come in for various reasons in the 15 category, not least because you'll get an answer much quicker, and sometimes it takes I mean, lots of people are successful the first time, but sometimes you're not, and it might just be it takes a little bit of refining until you get to that point. So I think that'd probably be my advice: sort of break it up into stages, and then treat each one of those as a project. But I mean, it's totally up to you how you do it. I mean, you can actually get. I mean, you can. I think the maximum time a project can last itself, I think, is 3 years. So I mean, you can come into a 3-year project, but of course, if you do that, I guess you'd want more money all in one go, and that might be a big ask. So my advice would be to chop it up into other projects, but obviously it's up to you in the end because it's yours.
Cool, thank you.
There was in the description about the new guidelines mention of how the scheme was aiming to be more responsive to the needs of independent organisations and individual practitioners. Is there anything more that you can say about that?
Yeah, I mean, Leah might have something else as well, but I mean, from my point of view, really, I think it's partly because in terms of the funding that's been available through us, for emergency funding since the COVID crisis, that's been and looks like it's going to continue to be very focused on organisations. I mean, we did have emergency funding for individuals back in the late spring, but so it's really a response to that, really, in terms of making sure that individuals know that this is somewhere they can come for funding. Do you want to say anything about that, Liam?
Yeah, I think one of the major changes, like we said, is the removal of the match funding, which we found was quite often a barrier for individuals, especially when they were looking to apply for Arts Council funding. So that's one thing that we've done to try and address the situation and hopefully make individuals aware that this is somewhere they can come to for funding and don't have to necessarily worry about meeting that match funding requirement. So I think that's a positive thing. Obviously, we're not talking about it today, but there is going to be more of the Developing Your Creative Practice Fund as well, which has been around for a few years now. Again, was postponed because of COVID, but is coming back later this year. So there are more opportunities for individuals coming down the line. But at the moment, I think our focus has been trying to keep the organisations that we fund and that we would like to fund from going bust, essentially.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to ask a question? We've got a good chunk of time left. No other hands raised so far.
I can't get my hand to raise.
Okay. Who's speaking? Sorry.
It's Carpenter.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
I don't know why I can't get it to do it. Yes, I'm wondering if there are any particular gaps that you recognise as things. You obviously get lots of applications in, but I wonder if there's something that you notice in the market that there's some gaps that would be useful. I haven't got anything specific in mind that I want to do, but whether those gaps are related to the COVID situation or whether they're just gaps generally in the arts, you know, what's out there, that you would be obviously particularly keen to take up. So something has come up. I've been running a WhatsApp group for the community while we were in lockdown. We had people who often help people in community centres for disabled with arts projects and things. And we noticed that they suddenly started coming onto the WhatsApp group saying, I need help, I'm going to have to do an online project with them, and we need materials for this and whatever. So making bird cages at home or something. So there's, because of the loss of facilities with the COVID, I'm wondering whether there's something there that we could be looking at as a community where we can plug some gaps specific to the COVID situation, that benefits obviously the arts community as well as the wider community.
Did you want to start with that one, Liam?
Yeah, I mean, obviously a big challenge right now is that, yes, a lot of venues are inaccessible or can't be used in the same way that they have been in the past. So, you know, with what you're saying about doing online projects, that's absolutely something that the people are having to get their heads around at the moment. And if there was some project that would help other artists to figure out the best way to run online projects, that's the sort of thing that I guess could fill a gap in the market currently that people might not have the knowledge or understanding to do in an effective way. So something like that would probably be useful. But I mean, I haven't seen anything specifically that I think is missing from the market, because like I said, our project grants are hugely varied and we see all sorts of types of things. If you can come up with a great innovative idea, we're happy to chat about it as well.
Okay, so would it extend to things like making of YouTube classes and things, or?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, the main thing that we look for with project grants is obviously that public benefit. So I think you can do almost anything really, as long as you can write a convincing argument for why it has a good public benefit. So if you're able to, I don't know, if you did do a YouTube class or online classes or whatever it is, then, and you can track that and prove to us the benefit, or, you know, the potential benefit of that, then it's always worth a punt.
Okay.
But obviously there has to be some sort of artistic content in that as well. I mean,
yeah,
just making a YouTube channel, it doesn't sound like an artistic activity to me as much as our children would claim it is.
Yeah, well, we had all sorts of things where people were stuck in. We were just doing it naturally, but just because people needed to, they couldn't get hold of material, so people were painting with spices and all sorts of things. You know, there were just ways of actually how do you do something in lockdown as a public art thing that you could do. Yeah. So I mean, a lot of things just happen quite impromptuly, but obviously, and they run plans, but obviously going forward, we can see that possibly that there could be a need for things like that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the case that, you know, we're expecting and hoping to get applications, you know, very soon that are addressing that lack of mobility at the moment, and that are using sort of digital solutions for that, you know, whatever the art form is, whether it's music or visual arts, you know. So that's obviously along the right line. The other thing I was going to say was that, you know, generally speaking, that, you know, this money, you know, lottery funded money is, you know, we're keen to reach as many people as possible, you know, with this. And sometimes we find that there's groups that are sort of underrepresented. So whether it's, you know, more diverse communities or those with disabilities. So any projects that can pick. I mean, we're not expecting project grants to sort of deliver our whole strategy, but anything that kind of speaks to that or can engage those sort of communities is going to look strong. For everything else being equal.
Oh, good. Thank you very much.
I just noticed a question in the chat. Someone's put, Jill's put in, what's the deadline date for putting in applications? We said it earlier, but project grants is a rolling program. There are no deadlines for project grants at all. At the moment, the changes that we talked about are changes that last until April 2021, but after April 2021, project grants are not going away. They will continue, but they might just be in a slightly different format to what they are at the moment. But yes, you can apply at any time.
And we've got hands up. Oh, Jill, did you want to ask another question? Jill Fordham, your hand is up. Otherwise, Angela Martin also has her hand up. Hello.
Sorry, I wasn't unmuted. Hello, I'm from the Cambridge Literary Festival. We obviously had to cancel spring, and probably winter as well will be affected, and we switched to digital, and they're learning very fast. I noticed on the, sorry, I missed the opening, so you may have covered this. That you cover organisational development is one of your bullet points. So if we were to be thinking now about structuring the team and having digital where we haven't had it before and have to fund the cost of putting in a digital team or a person, is that something that would qualify as a project?
Yeah, absolutely. What you'd need to bear in mind is that obviously that activity itself isn't a public facing thing. So in the section on public benefit, what you'd have to describe is, further down the line, once you've got these, changes in place, how will that then benefit the public? What is the work that you will then do, and how will you engage people and who those people are? But yeah, absolutely.
Great, thank you.
And we have another question in the chat from Julietta, who says, could you tell me if filming is something that that we're interested in or can fund? Yes, it is, but it depends on what it is you're filming. We don't fund film in the sense of funding cinema, for example, but we will fund filming of arts activity and artistic films. It's a bit of a nebulous one, that one, but yes, that again very much relies on a strong case for the public benefit of whatever it is you're filming, or how it will be used. We can also fund it, for example, for if an organisation, an artistic organisation would like to film some of their activity that they deliver or some of their performances, or that can be used in social media, for example, or to be put online. We can film that as well, but we wouldn't fund a film that would necessarily go in the cinema, because that's more like the British Film Institute.
Yeah, exactly. That which is their role. So we keep out of the way of the stuff that the British Film Institute would fund, because that's their job, to fund British cinema.
That's great. Do we have any more questions, please?
Actually, I was interested a bit in, how you said about additional support, like people that can help you with the applications and things like that. Do you find out about that through the customer support email, or?
Do you mean in terms of access support?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're after access support, yes, you can get that through customer services or on our website. There's an email that will allow you to access that. But if what you want is to actually just essentially pre-pitch a project to us or talk about a project with us before, because if you're at a stage where you don't know if it's something that we would necessarily fund and you want to find out a bit more about what we think of it, you can contact us relationship managers. I'm happy to give my email if anyone wants to talk about any upcoming projects that they would like to consider. And I could just drop that in the chat in a minute. But yeah, if it's access support, for example, actual help filling out your application or completing the application, that would be either customer services or on our website.
I'd also like to add to that at Cambridge City Council, the arts development officers can also support you in your application, and we can actually look at a draft of your application and give you feedback on that, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be really, really helpful. Thank you.
Great. Are there any other questions that people would like to ask? Well, I think Adrian and Liam, you've covered all aspects of the scheme. No other questions so far. Is there, well, let's turn this the other way. Is there something, Adrian and Liam, that you would like to know from the participants, and just to kind of, as a temperature check, really, maybe perhaps where people are at in terms of their thinking about applying to the scheme? You know, maybe you can, maybe there's something that you'd want to know from them.
I don't know if it's necessarily a question that I would have, but just an extra bit of support that is available on our website is there is a quiz in the project grant section about how ready is your project grant, which essentially you fill out, and it kind of lets you know where your project is at, or at what stage do you know, is it ready to submit, or does it need further development conversations? Does it require a bit of outside assistance? Does it require help in any way? Or are you ready to actually log on and just submit your project? So if you're at a stage where you have a great idea, but you're not sure, is it ready to go yet, or does it need a bit more time in the oven? You can absolutely use that, and it's a really useful tool as well.
That's a really good point to make. Is it probably also worth saying something about registering to Grantium as well? Yes.
So obviously we have our Arts Council website, but the actual portal that you use to apply for our funds is a grant portal called Grantium, which the registration can take up to 10 days. So if you are interested in applying for any of our projects or any of our funding at all, it's best to get onto Grantium and register your account sooner rather than later, because it means that, you know, it takes a bit of time for that to be set up. So if you really want to get your project going as soon as possible, you'll need to do that sooner rather than later, otherwise you'll have to wait a bit.
But you only have to do it once you've done it. Yeah. That's it. You just update the details whenever you need to.
Thank you. We've got a couple more hands raised. Jill Fordham.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted you to just go over what the who to go to at the City Council if you wanted to discuss applications. I wanted to ask if you could just repeat that.
Oh, sure. Basically, you can come to me. I'll email you after the session with the video, so you can respond to that if you'd like to arrange an appointment to discuss an application.
Okay, thank you.
And we have another question from Leslie Ford.
Hi, yeah, I was just not wanting to waste people's time by asking about my specific project, because I know I should do that outside of this forum, but it occurred to me this might apply to other people. If my company have got a piece of work that we have done, a piece of original theatre that we've developed and we have performed it once, but now we want to tour it, can we apply for that funding for that, even though we've already written the piece? Yeah, okay.
No, absolutely. I mean, it applies to lots of art forms, you know, even though you might have developed, you know, the work at another time, this project's about touring it. So absolutely, yeah, no problem at all.
Great, thank you.
And again, if anything, you can argue that, you know, there's a great case for public benefit there because more people get to see it, so and engage with it. So
fingers crossed. Thank you.
Yeah. We've got a question as well in the chat from Karen. Can one person apply for more than one grant? I believe you can, but as I understand it, I think there is a time, there is a gap in time before you can apply for another grant. Am I right in thinking, Adrian?
What you can't have is outstanding, but more than one outstanding application in the system that you've not got an answer from. So if you've applied for something, you can't make another application until you've got an answer on that first application. You can apply for, let's say, another, you've got the money and you've started a project grant. Now, if you had an idea to do a separate project, you can apply to do that if it's something separate whilst you're still delivering the first one. But you'd need to make sure you are up to date in terms of the reporting on that first project. If not, you'd need to get in touch with customer services to explain why. If things were not up to date. But you can have concurrent projects running, but you just can't have concurrent applications, if you see what I mean.
And in terms of monitoring, which Adrian's obviously just mentioned, our monitoring is very light touch, so please don't worry about that or let that put you off. All we do is have a mid-project review, which is a very, very basic, simple form that we send you, which just asks you to update us. Is your project running on track? If not, what's going on? And, we won't look badly on your project if it's running behind for whatever reason. As long as we see there's a logical reason. And obviously, with the world in the way it is at the moment, that's probably likely to happen. And then at the end of the project as well, just a summary of how did it go, who did you reach, what was the reaction to it, So it's very simple monitoring forms.
I think it might be worth saying something about application response and feedback. I think often people apply to the programs and then get a negative response and don't immediately reply, don't immediately apply again. Could you say something about feedback on applications?
Yeah, that's a bit. I think sometimes, and I understand why, particularly artists that are obviously very proud of their work, and particularly if I think as an individual practitioner, it's quite be an unknowing thing to kind of ask your work to be appraised in some way. But a rejection from a project grant application is not a slight on your work. There's only so much budget in each week, in each meeting, and not everything can be funded. So if you do get a rejection, you will get a reason why. It won't be a very long explanation, but it will at least show you the sort of area that you would want to look at working on before coming back in. So the idea is that you would address that, and then you can reapply. And for many people that is their way of engaging with us for the first time and all developing a relationship with us, really. So yes, please don't be offended by a rejection. It is not that you're no good and don't darken our door again. It's just on this occasion we couldn't fund it. You might want to look at this for applying next time.
Yeah, I think it was really worth making that point because it is very much about making the relationship and not being put off, but using that as an opportunity to build on and improve what you've already set the foundations for. Do we have any other questions that people would like to ask? Also thinking about audience engagement, is it worth maybe saying a few words about expectations on that for the application process and for the project as well? How the importance of that audience development?
Yeah. Obviously, it comes back to the public benefit angle of we want to see as many people being able to engage with your work as possible. Right now, with the current situation, obviously that's going to look very different, and we're not expecting the kind of audiences or engagement that we would necessarily have seen previously or would have expected to see previously. But obviously, there are opportunities for other forms of engagement, for example, through digital means or any other way of connecting with people. I mean, obviously we want to see some audience development, and if you do build up a relationship with us and you receive multiple project grant funding and work with us over the years, obviously the aim would be to see your audiences grow and develop with you as you grow. but obviously, again, there's no pressure necessarily to do that. So really, as long as the projects are of a good quality that we'd expect to see as well.
Do we have any more questions from the group? Nothing in the chat. And what about project evaluation? There's guidance available, isn't there, via the Arts Council about how to address that?
In terms of evaluating the project yourself?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, there is some advice on that, and I think generally speaking, we'd expect probably a higher level of evaluation the higher the financial value of the project. But yes, I mean, you know, if you're applying for public money and you want to deliver something, we'd expect that you should have an idea of what success looks like for the successful delivery of that project, and how you measure that to show that's what's happened. But yeah, you're right. There is guidance around various ways to do that on the website. But it is important, not least for yourself, so that you can, whatever it is you're delivering, you can see how well you're doing and what could be perhaps tweaked for next time you deliver a similar project.
Absolutely. Earlier we had a question from somebody who was considering perhaps undertaking some online activity as a project. The Arts Council has the Digital Culture Network. Is there anything that you could share about that to inform our participants about how they can use that towards the development of their work?
Yeah, yes, the Digital Culture Network is probably one of the best tools we have available to us at the moment. It's a team of specialists in different aspects of tech. So we've got people that are specialists in social media, for example, people that are specialists in e-commerce, all those different activities that arts organizations might engage with. And they are available, and they run sessions and different training courses. Some of them are up on our website, some of them happen periodically. So it would be really useful, I think, especially if you've never either considered doing this sort of work before or are having to look into doing it now because of the circumstances, to get familiar with the Digital Culture Network, and they can certainly help you out.
Marvellous. There is a new question in the chat. Giulietta is asking whether or not it's advisable to apply more than once for the same project.
I presume that means if you've had a rejection and you apply again for the same thing. Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, I think if you were to keep applying and again and again, and it kept getting rejected, I think at some point someone would get in touch and say, this is why this is happening. Maybe you want to look at it. But absolutely, I mean, rejecting applications, unfortunately, is a part of the job, and that there'll always be good applications that just can't be funded from week to week because there's a finite amount of money, and also given the nature of the open programme. We don't know from week to week what the quality of applications will be. There might be such amazing applications one week, but it's so hard to and certainly not everyone can be funded. So absolutely, I suppose that there might become a point where whatever the activities you want to do, circumstances that allow that to happen might expire because of what season it's in, or deadlines, or artist availability, that sort of thing. But absolutely, keep applying. If you still want to do it, just keep going until you get there, really. And as I say, you will always have, if there is a rejection, you'll be told what the reason for that is, so you'll be given pointers as to what you might want to look at and address on a subsequent application.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to note, that there is a level of feedback. It's not just sort of yes or no, and in a kind of generic format. There is a reason expressed as to why an application isn't successful. So there's usually some information that you can work off of to develop further. Yeah.
And that's the reason. That's why it's there. It's so that you to help you reapply.
Brilliant. We're coming into the last few minutes of our session. Are there any further questions that you'd like to ask?
It's Sharon again. I can't get my hand to raise. I'm afraid my icon doesn't seem to work.
No worries.
I can't do that on my laptop either. I don't know how you do that.
No, there's something funny going on. I'm new to all this, so I'm just wondering about lead-in times on. Or it would be small projects I'd be looking at, but what sort of lead-in time do you think we should allow for that? I guess it varies a bit, but is there a minimum?
No, well, it depends what it is. I mean, if you were doing a tour, I'd be quite alarmed if the lead-in time was like 4 weeks after the.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, it depends what's required in terms of a lead-in, and it's whatever's required to put it in place, and I suppose crucially have an audience ready for it. So there's no minimum time, but it's obviously it needs to look appropriate to the project that you want to deliver.
But also in terms of your turnaround of the applications, to how much time should we allow for you to turn around, say, a small arts project?
That's a given amount. So if it's a £15,000 or under application, it takes 6 weeks. There's that's fixed, and if it's over that, then it's 12 weeks.
Okay.
And so it's one or the other depending on how much you're applying for, and that's it's pretty. It is consistent.
Okay, and that's you haven't had problems with the COVID situation changing that in some way. You haven't got like big backlogs or functioning okay.
Well, it only opened last week because we shut it. But no, we will always. I think it will even if we have to work through the night, it'll be delivered on time. No, I'm not expecting any delays in that. No, it'll be the same.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. Would anyone like to have the last word, the last question before we finish? No takers? Okay, well, I think we will leave it at that. I would like to thank Adrian and Liam for delivering the presentation and answering all the questions. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
As I said at the top of the session, we have recorded this and we'll be sharing it with everybody who's registered for this session. And I also want to let you know about Culture Under COVID. It's a 2-week programme of discussions happening from the 3rd to the 14th of August. The CAN network has organised this. It's an opportunity to talk about how COVID has impacted our arts and cultural delivery and what ideas we may have to get us beyond this. Certainly, you'd have the chance to meet a few other practitioners and organisations who are experiencing similar things to you, and maybe bounce ideas off them as to how we might be able to work together better to see us through the other side of the virus. To book that, all you need to do is visit the CAN website and search for Culture Under COVID, but I'll also send you a link when I send you the video. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending this afternoon. It's really great to see such a good number of people and such a variety as well of practitioners and organisations. I hope you found it really useful. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.